Hey everyone, welcome to 21st Century Saints, our podcast and live stream series for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and those who hang around this vicinity here in the UK and also around the world. I'm your host, Jane Christie, and I've got my co-host with me, Sarah. There's me doing it. Me doing it now. Sara, I am so sorry.
That's okay. That is okay.
Hi, Sara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sara, just in case you hadn't worked it out by now.
Sara with an ah. Yeah, with the shoulders. Yeah. Okay, that's going to stick. We're starting to make a bit of a habit of scheduling a broadcast and going a little bit earlier now, just because I don't know, just because life. So we'll just do a little bit of introduction stuff while we wait on everyone joining us. What have we got to tell people about? First of all, if you're recovering from conference, if you had a great time, that's fantastic. If you're traumatized by it, then we are here. We know that this has been a tough one for many, many people. Announcements, we've got Sunstone is coming up.
Sunstone.
Sara, do you want to talk about Sunstone UK for a minute?
Sunstone is going to be fabulous. There's the most amazing range of presentations, everything from art type, discovery, exploration work, to academic presentations about history of the church and everything in between. There's going to be everything from table tennis to bars to do the tequila slammers or whatever it is your thing is for Sunstone. There's going to be a fabulous group of people to meet. If you bring your merch, if you get yourself onto 21st Century Saints or Nemo the Mormons Facebook page, get yourself on there. Order a t-shirt, order a tote bag, order some merch, bring it along with you to Sunstone, and we'll get our boy Nemo to autograph everything, and Peter Blinkley and everyone else. The gang can all the boys can autograph it. They're killers for saying that, but don't worry about it. We'll handle it.
So here's how this is going to go down. If you show up with your merch to be signed, Peter will laugh, but it's going to happen. People will sign it. Sara's going to have the on duty Sharpie. Nemo will attempt to run. We will make sure that we corner him for you.
We will.
If you get your merch signed, please take a photograph of his blushes, because he is just a complete drama queen. I mean, get over yourself, Nemo. Seriously.
Seriously. But you've just got time to order some merch. Bring it along to Sunstone. It's in Knoll in Solihull, the Greswold Hotel. There's buffet lunch on the Saturday. There's buffet kind of cheese platter desserts on the Sunday. There's a fantastic opening on the Friday evening with Self on the Shelf. So that should be an exciting, brilliant kick-off to conference at 8 o'clock on the Friday evening. Kick-off to Sunstone. Sorry, folks. 8 o'clock on the Friday evening. And loads of good things to look forward to. New friends to make, new experiences to have. So come and enjoy.
Love it. Enjoy, everyone who's there, and don't forget to take lots of photographs. We love to see them. What else do we have to announce? We've actually got a super busy several weeks coming up. We've been invited to speak at a few events and things. We'll share information about that online. But meantime, let's get started with this topic that we're going to talk about tonight. So we want to cover quite a few things tonight. We're going to start a place and we're going to end up very, very far away from where we started. This is not a staying on topic evening tonight. So we are looking forward to, if you want to share your thoughts, please drop in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, so
let me get onto the chat.
Let's start off with talking about where everyone is at right now on my Facebook page. We've got a bit of polarity, which we're seeing increasingly after conference. We have lots and lots of people who are using the hashtag #ThinkCelestial, which just punches me in the heart with the grammar, the structure of that two-word phrase.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrific to my soul. The intent behind it is It is there. There is there's an intent behind it. But yeah, there's lots of people using the hashtag telling us to think as invited to by the prophet, and just as much there is rather a lot of commentary talking about the pain that comes from it. Sara, do you want to maybe share your thoughts about what you're seeing and how people are responding to President Nelson's invitation or his comments?
I think what we're hearing is people sharing a range of concerns around some of the comments that President Nelson made. And these are people that are feeling hurt and are aware that the comments he made may seriously impact on how friends and family start treating people from now on, and how people may not be respected for their beliefs, their opinions, their views in the future. There was we take these apart a little bit more as the evening goes on, but there were a few key things that President Nelson said. One of them was
let's just pull it apart just now, just super quickly, so we can leave it.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. One of the comments President Nelson made, and I think Jane might have the talk available for us to get the exact wording, but he said, don't take counsel, don't listen to unbelievers. Now, that's really problematic. If you are the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the son, the daughter, the friend, if you have a calling in the church and it's known that your belief is not in the church, you don't believe the church is true, you don't believe the teachings of the church, then being told not to take counsel and not to listen to you can cause a lot of strain on relationships and lead people to be really anxious about where that leaves them. I'm going to put my cards on the table here. I have a state calling as a state safeguarding specialist. I have told my bishop and my state president that I don't hold to a lot of the beliefs of the church. There are things I don't believe. There are things I do believe. There are things I don't believe.
Yeah.
Does that comment, don't take counsel from unbelievers, mean it's going to be harder for me to find a credible voice in that space? And I don't know. I have yet to find out, and that may be problematic.
Tell me something. If the counsel that we got from believers was consistently, let's not even say consistently, let's go for that gold standard. If it was reliable, if it was good counsel and never did harm, what would that make things a bit different?
I think it would. I think it could improve relationships dramatically, couldn't it? If we had counsel that people shared and people felt confident in. But why can't the counsel be? It doesn't matter what people think and believe. It doesn't matter if we believe differently. It doesn't matter what your best friend, your mother, your son, your daughter, anyone else, your partner, it doesn't matter what you believe. There's still room. There's room in this space for a range of beliefs, no matter where they fall on the spectrum. And there's room in this space for people to differ and still have huge respect and trust and confidence in one another. My concern is that the wording of this talk may be taken by some people to be, well, actually, we're right to be insular and we're right to be arrogant as a church because we clearly do know a lot more than other people. We've been fighting on our safeguarding campaign for the church to become more transparent and to be involved in external agencies and to bring them into the church to support safeguarding. Comments like, we don't need to listen to unbelievers, make that a sort of dream that's falling away a little bit, and that's what worries me about that. So there's that comment you made that I think is problematic, that we could probably talk about all night.
Yeah,
but there's a
before we move on from that, because I feel really, really strongly about this, that the assumption is the believers, their counsel is the one we listen to because that is the best. And let me just give him that. Let me give the believers that, right? If we were to do the thought experiment of guaranteeing that all advice that comes from any source, Sara, are you enjoying your clicky pen? Because
I'm sorry, put the clicky pen down.
You're going to get your scratch mitts on next.
You're right. I need a little fidget toy. That's what I need, a little fidgety toy. Yeah. A silent one. You know, like the quiet toys we used to give our children. Do you remember quiet books that we gave our children in sacraments? So they'd sit quietly with a little book that was not making any sounds. I need one of those. So if anybody wants to make me one.
So that, can I just say that not only am I super not stressed, just recovering from conference, but also in that sort of heightened trying to regulate state, I'm also doing what we normally do in 21st Century Saints, and doing this podcast while there are a million things going on in my home. So I feel like I am, yeah, super aware of everything that's going on right now, hyper vigilant. So anyway, going back to this thought experiment, if we were to guarantee that any organization, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the council, is always going to be, or most of the time will be, effective, safe, and correct, that even then would still not be a
That's
healthy
no,
way to live.
no,
Could you maybe
it's
say a
not.
bit about why?
There's something very unhealthy about always assuming that the counselling, guidance, and teachings you have to give other people are right. That doesn't leave any scope for people's personal interpretation, personal development, personal growth. To always assume that you are coming from the position of the one who's in the right is actually very othering, and it's very dismissive of where other people are at. It enables a lot of cognitive distortions to be running through the minds of people who think that everything they believe and everything they teach and say is right. It also enables frustration with people who don't listen to them with, well, what's wrong with you? We know we're right, so why aren't you listening? Which is one
That
of the
one's
things that
really
we hear
important.
all the time. I think it is because we hear that all the time. Well, the church is true. No, sorry, don't. Well, you know this is right. You know this is true. And when you don't accept it and you don't believe that, or you kick against it, or you're pushing against it in any way whatsoever, the problem with that is you then get labelled to one of the different labels like we've heard in the past, like lazy learner, easily offended, you're rocking the boat, you're being deceived by Satan, your faithless, your worthiness, and then you as a person come into question as to what is your value in this
Yeah,
space.
and I think because we're going to really focus on the othering part of it in a second, but we we were having one of our witching hour conversations earlier this week, and we were talking about how, so I feel really strongly about online relationships. I think that often we see a sort of virtuousness applied to types of communication. So it's a, if you use Facebook, you'll see how disdainful some people may look at it, especially if you're a woman. And teenagers get this a lot. That it would be a sort of more, it would be a better choice to be reading or write a letter or do something better, communicate, socialize in other ways. And the difficulty is, for someone like me, who's a carer, never even mind, this is nothing compared to the amount of people who have disabilities and cannot have face-to-face communication in ways that able-bodied or people without those barriers have to face every day. And so online communication is an absolute lifeline and has improved the quality of life for so many people. And suddenly we have worldwide, you can reach your community online. It is wonderful. And I sort of, even whenever we hear scrolling being sort of criticized, and before you know it, you kind of lose track of time. We all do that in books, and listening to music, or have it, if you're completely immersed in doing a thing and you've not paid attention to time, but for some reason we that's more sort of frowned upon. And the way I sort of describe it, we've spoken about this, is like people watching in the park. You're just letting it wash over you. And if you're using that completely, now obviously, taken to the extreme, you don't want to be staying up all night doing things like that. But assigning a morality to it is, I guess, what I'm talking about.
Well, Jane, can I just point out, in the church, we assign high moral standing to anybody who will lose themselves for hours in family history or scripture study. If you say, "Oh, I didn't get any of the gardening or shopping or housework done I meant to do over the weekend because I was too busy doing family history," people will be saying, "Oh, yeah, it's so addictive, isn't it?" And speaking about it in ways that make it a very positive thing to be doing. But as you say, Facebook, that keeps you in touch and
Yes.
connected.
The assumption is we're all on here just gossiping and showing off about our lives. And just to, because I want the commenter to know, we're going to come back and talk about this in a second. We've got a fantastic comment that's come in that we're just going to discuss just presently. So if you could just hang in there for a moment. So yeah, so we're talking about social media use, and there's a morality attached to it, and a preferred way that we should be acting. But one of the problems that does come up is, as we were talking about this week, is that when we are only associating with the people who hold the same types of views as us, when we have these safe communities, that we don't get the practice of, yeah, I can leave, I guess is what I'm saying. It's very, very easy just to hit the leave button to move to a different group. The friendships that you have, you're less accountable for them in a lot of ways. And one of the difficulties I think we have at the moment is how we give people the practice of being able to be in community where you are going to hear from people who fundamentally have complete opposite viewpoints, and yet we get along with very, very well. And which is why I think we're going to talk about the Brit Avengers later on and things like that. Also, we need that ability to think. Otherwise, if we're not being presented with all of the information and all of the perspective, then we are missing something fundamental to be able to think, well, is that, why is this my belief, or what enriches me about this? We don't get to think really meaningfully about what we have. We talk about opposition and all things, except you don't really, definitely don't listen to the things that are not just look at the single train of thought. It's not healthy. It's not how we educate. It's not how we learn. It's absolutely not how we progress.
Definitely.
There's something I think missing for the individual who, and nobody's saying you have to look at, terrible things that are distressing to you. Nobody's saying that. But if you have this attitude of, we will only listen to people who think the same things as we do, then it's very, very dangerous. And it's dangerous from a safeguarding perspective as well. It means that we are vulnerable only to specific individuals and viewpoints.
Well, it's doubling down on some of those very harmful messages we've heard in the past about don't criticise. We hold the moral authority, and what we say goes, so you just need to listen.
Yeah.
And none of that allows for the greatest gift God gave any of us, which is agency. None of that allows for agency. It actually takes it away, because it's like, don't worry about what people say. We'll tell you what you need to know. And it's back to that message, isn't it? It's back to that message of we're spoon feed you, and that will all be okay, because you don't need critical thinking, analytical skills. You don't need to be able to identify cognitive distortions. You don't need to be able to weigh evidence up and think about what do I think of that, and what's the evidence for it, what's the evidence against it, to come to conclusions that are right for you and your family and people around you. You don't need to do any of that. And that's the problem with statements like that. That is the problem with statements about don't take counsel from unbelievers. Well, I'm sorry, most of our dentists, doctors, plumbers, mechanics, police officers, most of the people around are unbelievers. And are certainly not going to be coming to any of these things.
Yeah. There was this glorious moment that I don't know if, because we've had so many other things to talk about, people have been so stressed and upset and distressed by this talk, that there's this moment where President Nelson talks about how he receives some negative feedback, even criticism, from his work colleagues. And I mean, how it was laughed at that, you know, if you don't agree with me, and no, no idea, President Nelson was possibly completely correct. It may be
Yeah.
he had a colleague who is hearing his views on evolution and is sort of saying, you can't, you know, this is not, this doesn't reflect how a person who's a physician and has your standing should be thinking. That's worrying to me. It may be anything, but we're supposed to be challenged in our actions. And I think most importantly, and this is the very, very dangerous thing for me, if you're the head of a church and you have that opinion and that's what works for you, fantastic. You've lived an enjoyable life. If you get no regrets, awesome. On the other hand, if you're advising people to check a belief system before they listen, so what I have to do then is I have to find out where you are, and it's this sort of, you know, this parlance that we'll use. Are you using the right words? Are you wearing the right clothes? Are you attending your meetings frequently enough? Or have you just said something that makes me think that, hold on, you're maybe disagreeing here. You're saying that there are issues in the church, perhaps with abuse or with safeguarding or with your calling or whatever it could be. All of those things are enough to ring the alarm bell that I have to then see that there is an issue. I have to determine your worthiness, because that's what we're talking about. You know, a believer, we're talking about, because people believe all sorts of different things. We're talking about your orthodoxy. Are you orthodox? So are you worthy to be in this space?
Right.
I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So moving to the effect that that's had on
And
families. So for
that's
individuals
problematic.
itself, it's not healthy. It's not healthy to not be able to listen to someone saying, look, you might be getting this wrong. What about what we're seeing from individuals?
We're hearing these comments from individuals. The worry about what is my non-believing husband or wife gonna, what is my true believing husband or wife gonna make of my position and my views now? Is this going to cause conflict? Is this going to cause problem?
Yeah.
How are we going to effectively parent when we've got a mixed faith relationship, when one of us believes one thing, one believes something else, and children are being told don't take counsel from unbelievers? Are they going to automatically, those children going to be thinking, actually the prophet says don't take counsel from unbelievers? And this is the difficulty. The church doesn't expand and qualify some of these statements. This will be gaslighted in a few in a time to come. This will.
We'll see
This will be gaslighted. You're going to see the gaslighting all over the place, aren't you? It's going to be there.
You're going to love when this talk, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's going to be so gaslit, very in the sort of short to come days. But well, this is what was intended. This was what was said. This was what was meant. But actually, that's not what's been said. What has been said is don't take counsel from unbelievers, with a lot of other wording that I can't remember the exact wording around that led up to that statement.
Yeah.
And it's, hang on a minute. How about we just say, do you know what? The early traditions, the earliest histories and traditions of this church were get counsel from the best books, learn from the best books available to you, learn from the experts around you, understand everything that you can, gain as much knowledge as it's possible to gain. Nowhere in the early tradition and history of the church did it say batten down the hatches and only believe what people inside the church tell you.
Mm-hmm.
The school of the prophets was all about education, learning, development. Brigham Young University is about education, development, understanding. So it's kind of slightly sits somewhere for me in a quite a strange position with what we see in the church. This don't take counsel from unbelievers. Well, actually, therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, counsellors, usually unbelievers. Does that mean we have to go in with, as Wendy Nelson said a while ago, a question mark against anything that's not said by the prophet?
Oh, it's absolutely going to do that. But I think more than that, when we see there is already a tension when someone leaves church and the family are active, there is a huge tension there for people to even have those conversations about stepping away from the church. It can have devastating consequences, and we know from it, you know, we've lived in this space long enough. often families choose the church over the individual for whatever reason. And it is horrific and heartbreaking when that happens. And families who are making efforts to try and live in that relationship and are trying to protect these relationships, if you're going down a route, whether it's you're working on this yourself, or even if you're going to therapy and you're being asked to take on board the unbeliever's point of view, can you understand where they're coming from, to be able to work in relationship together? That's the ideal, to have relationship together, not for us all to think the same way, not that you don't listen then. And it might be that the thing that they are saying is so important and so valuable, and often it is when you've got those fresh eyes. This is the point where I want to bring in this fantastic comment, and I won't share your name without permission unless you give us a shout and tell us it's okay to do that. But this wonderful comment here says, I haven't had a calling in 7 years. My stake president and new bishop has said that I am allowed, air quotes, to minister, but not get involved with anything else. We have awful questions. All of this because, all of this because I have publicly advocated for single adult safeguarding, oh, you wonderful women, and for better support for vulnerable adults. How should I deal with this? I feel completely ostracised. Now, she goes on to say, as a lifelong member, she has seen the push to create categories of worthiness, and it makes a comment about educated women being dangerous. Thank you so much for it. And what I'm really appreciating in this conversation is that what you're experiencing in this church relationship is very similar to what people are fearing for and already experiencing in their family relationships, whether that's in couples or whether that's with parents or children. It's this feeling of, I am being ostracized. You might not be. I don't believe for 1 second any family or church leader out there is saying, let's ostracize this person. The Brit Avengers, we have all lived in this space. Might not be what you're intending, but this is the effect it has. Your thoughts, Sarah?
I think my heart goes out to you, and my heart goes out to you for the courage that you have had to literally take a stand and say, this injustice cannot continue, and this is what I want you to do to make things better for the children that Heavenly Father loves that are on this earth today. And God is with you. That much I can tell you. God will be with you in that stance that you are taking to say to leaders, this is not okay. Now, you might find your family, friends, and church aren't with you, but our experience is very much that does not mean God is not with you. We've all over years, we've all lost friends, we've lost people close to us, we've had leaders refuse to speak to us. That comes from a position of fear and mistrust and anxiety because they don't know what to do. I think what you've done is incredible, and we would love to have a conversation with you outside of this forum to maybe talk about how we could perhaps support you a little bit better with the stance that you're taking. So if you are up for dropping us a message confidentially with an email or something on there, then we would love to take this up and support you further with what you're trying to do.
All these badass people. So that's Kirsty, who's organised us to hear.
Amazing, amazing.
Well, I think more than that, they might well be ostracizing you. That's the effect of it. So let's call it what it is. That's your lived experience. That's what that is. There are conversations that some of the Brit Avengers push for those conversations to happen. Some of us just don't need to go there for whatever reason. Some of us choose not to go there for our mental health. But we just know that you're in the company of a lot of people who are in this same space. And what that has helped me to realise is exactly what kind of Sarah's inviting you into. When you're in this community, you start to realise that maybe part of a community that once we relied on if it doesn't look like that anymore, you have all of these people who are welcoming you to say, yeah, me too. And you know, when you're ostracizing half the bloody planet, more than half the planet, then you know we start to kind of realize that, oh, actually there is a life just maybe looks a little bit different. This is crap. We're going to have to look at how we want to address that. But you know,
and I think we need to take the words of the hymn to our advantage, not to the churches. Though the numbers may be few, and compared with the opposite hosting view, and you know, our numbers may be few that are standing for things that are right and just and that need to happen. Our numbers might be few when you compare it with the opposite hosts that are in view. You know, that hymn. But believe me, God is there. Miracles will happen in that space. And it's just, it's quite sad that people can't see it. It's sad that people are mistrusting of it.
Well,
and it's sad that people don't see that those positions that you're taking, Kirsty, is a position you're taking because you love the church and you love the people.
And
you're subject to leadership roulette. I mean, I am the winner out of everyone at this moment in time because I've got fantastic leaders around me, which is absolutely superb. But I know that the vast majority of people are not experiencing that.
Yes, and more than that, I would say to listen to that counsel, to you know, you've been ostracized, it disempowers you. You can't act on your own inspiration, and not even just your inspiration, just your desire to be a blooming good human. You can't move forward. So there's almost a spiritual death there. You're being, you know, effectively soft excommunicated because you can't even push back about it. So I mean, if some people, if you want to push for dialogue about that, we are your team. You know, we are here for you in that. But I also want to put a pin in, because there's a broader point I want to come back to, because we're going to go somewhere with this. There's also this, you know, we're just talking about the impact at the moment, and we've not even talked about, you know, like, I'm just going to say it because we're not going to go deep into it. The Think Celestial hashtag, which is awful. The principles behind it are just, you know, it.
Who is this Think Celestial for, Jane? Who is this Think Celestial for? It's not for those of us that are queer. It's not there. Who is this Think Celestial for? It's not for those of us that sit on the margins. It's not for those of us that question. Who is Think Celestial for?
It's the reboot version of Keep an Eternal Perspective. When Eternal Perspective was doing the rounds the past few years, now we've got an edgy little 2-word quote we can stick on a mug and share on social media. And it means don't think about things right now, because that's what's important. What we've been talking about.
But do you know what? There's a problem with that.
Right, go. Yes,
there's a huge problem with this. Let's think celestial. Let's focus on eternity. Let's put all our energy into thinking about what's going to happen in eternity, because that means we can dismiss your pain and suffering on this earth because it's only temporary and it's okay because you've got the celestial kingdom to look forward to. So don't worry about any of these things that are happening to you on this earth. It's all okay. Don't worry about your trials, your tribulations, your problems. It will all be okay in the next life, which is not giving that kind of support, nurturing, protection, guidance to people as they go through human experiences on this earth. And there's a friend of mine said many years ago, and I've never forgotten it. She was saying it about an individual, but I think it applies to the church when they go around making comments like this. You're so heavenly bound, you're no earthly good.
Right.
And we could be so bound up with heaven, so bound up with what the next life is going to bring, that we're not much use to people on this earth today.
Right. And so that's exactly where I'm coming from, Sarah, with what we wanted to achieve with this episode, is that I hope for a richness every time conference comes around. I hope to be able to have something to get my teeth into, to really think. And all I hear is talks that will be quoted all year, discussed kind of, but there's nothing to wrestle with. There's nothing to really change from. And this conversation, though, this is the conversation that I think we can really pull apart and see how it works. There's two things I want to bring in right now. First of all, when the British rescue and it was happening, we're sort of seeing, and here in the UK, we're seeing there's a sort of after wave that has been happening these past few months as a result of that. So we've seen stakes merging, realigning, closing, boundaries changing, and there is so much change. So apostles came over to the UK to talk to people, except weirdly it wasn't open like it has been previously. The people generally were not invited to come. Now you think about being a Mormon in this country is hard work. You have to really want to be Latter-day Saint here. We're not tripping over chapels everywhere. To not, even sort of spare time for the people who are desperate to hear these messages. We don't get that kind of ministry. We don't see apostles in the grocery store. So these kind of closed leadership only meetings have been happening, and the messaging that has been shared that is supposed to be disseminated through wards and stakes is a message of unity. Now, I find this fascinating that we are focusing on unity at a time when all of this is happening. What is unity going to do that?
Who do we want involved in this unity?
Right.
Because this isn't unity for every single person that is alive today, just because they're human, because they're a worthwhile person, because they're alive. So who is this unity actually for? Who do we want to unify?
Right.
Those who believe.
So here's this.
I mean, I don't know. Who do we want to unify?
I've been holding on to share this quote from Catherine, this comment from our friend Catherine. She says that she made a clip of President Nelson's "Don't Counsel with Unbelievers" statement, and it got shared as a reel over 1,000 times, and it's predominantly being shared by sort of hardcore TBM Mormons, the very conservative Mormons, using it to prop up this idea of keeping everything in house. And so Catherine deleted it eventually. We are seeing all over the internet these thoughts being shared and people sharing their opposing opinions, and it's really tough. There is so much pain out there. Now, I wanted to share this thing that remember back when I was talking with you about it, Sarah, and we really got to dig into it last weekend. But there is a fantastic podcast that back when I first started listening to podcasts, this was one of the ones that I just loved. And it's called, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, it's called Everything is Alive. I think it's Ian Chillag is the content creator, and it's a superb podcast. It's kind of existential, but in this really accessible way. And literally what he does is interviews inanimate objects. A Coke can. We have Maeve, a lamppost, and it turns out Maeve has always wanted to dance. And it's just these fantastic conversations, and you learn a little bit too, and it gives thought to what living is. In one particular episode, Ian interviews a grain of sand, and the way the dynamic of this interview was working was they were having a conversation, and then the grain of sand had to kind of stop and ask for a little bit of clarification from each other, because they realized that they communicate differently because they see themselves differently. As a grain of sand, the grain of sand pointed out that I don't see myself as a grain of sand. I would say, rather than I'm a grain of sand, I would say I am sand. And isn't it really unusual? It's very different to me that you would you call yourself a grain of humanity? How would you refer to yourself? And I just thought this was such a wonderful idea. And so I think for me, this idea of unity is actually an extremely powerful idea, this idea of oneness and all of these grains of sand, which are not sameness, there is individuality, but you see this group becomes powerful, effective, complete as part of the whole. And in doing the don't counsel with anybody else who's not sand or who's not part of how you identify with yourself, you miss the ability to be able to both be an individual anyway, but also be part of a bigger group, because you are not, you're sort of limiting your ability to connect. And connecting is how you see yourself in relation to someone else. That is so important, to just be human. We are to not take counsel from anybody else. You're elevating where you are, and you're not seeing them as being worthy of being on that level to talk to you, because it's just so divisive. Anyway, thoughts, Sarah?
I love the grain of sand analogy. I love that, isn't it? It's wonderful, isn't it? Because that grain of sand is more than just a single grain of sand. One grain of sand in itself can be washed, trampled, moved away, can't it?
Yeah, so I just realised I accidentally shouldn't have shared something on screen, but it's okay. Keep talking. Nothing to say here.
Nothing to say here. Move on, everyone.
So,
Let's move on.
sorry,
Let's move
Kirsty.
on. Let's move on, everyone. So that grain of sand, if you take one single solitary grain of sand, it will do nothing to hold back floodwaters. You unite that grain of sand in a container that holds it securely, and put something strong around it, then that grain of sand will perform miracles in holding back floodwater. When my daughter's house was flooded, after the first flood, they got a load of sandbags. If they'd put a couple of grains of sand down, it would have made no difference at all. Filling the sandbags with sand, the sand united, it melted together, it just kind of did, and it absorbed all of the water the flood wanted to throw at it. People are like that. If we are united, we can absorb so much more, and we can exhibit so much more strength, and we can give so much more, and we can be built and shaped and be powerful in so many phenomenal ways. But we need to decide which grains of sand we're having in that barrel with us.
And
because
I still rebel against it though, Sarah, because one of the distressing things for me in, being a sister in Relief Society, right?
Yeah.
If we are sand, I would feel like I was losing identity. And Think Celestial was so distressing to me, because that isn't what I want. What you people are talking about, and the buzzwords eternal increase, but we won't really say what that means. Also shout out to, the prophet Russell M. Nelson for traumatizing us all with those thoughts this conference. I mean, that's not going anywhere soon. But, what if we don't want that? Now, the beauty of this is, and I feel so strongly about this, Kirsty sort of, talking about this in her comment, that, that the ostracization or the isolation is being presented as keeping you safe, because there is a real threat. People get angry, people get, in Mormonism, can be violently so, especially in, these areas where, conservatism can be very, very strong, and fundamentalism. We as Brit Avengers, we've had our own, safeguarding issues that we've had to be aware of.
We have, yeah.
The thing that I've been able to see modelled from working with, we always say Peter, Nemo, Julian, Ruth, they have such different approaches and also such different opinions. There's much of the same ground that we share. We are absolutely on the same page with so many things, but there are other things that are fundamentally, in essence, very, very different. And yet there is absolute unity, even though we completely disagree. And that, to me, is more godlike. I
That's
mean,
celestial. That's celestial.
that's celestial.
That I don't like that word, but that is actually what that is about. Because that unity comes from a place of genuine love and concern for one another, of genuine respect for where each other are at. It's like,
Mhm.
well, I think this. Well, I don't actually agree with you on that. This is what I think. Oh, okay. And we have a discussion about it. But at the end of the day, it comes from respect. It comes from being able to listen to difference, from not feeling that we have to defend ourselves every time we have a different opinion or a different view.
Mhm.
I can turn around and say, well, I'm not doing that. That's not happening. Oh, okay. So why? Why do you feel so strongly about it? And we have a really good discussion about it. We have had conversations where we have been told not to be friends with one another in the Brit Vengers. We have had priesthood leaders say to us, you should not be friends with these people. You should not associate with each other. And we're just like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, whatever. Because and what builds that unity are those godlike qualities and human qualities. Whether you believe in God or not, they're the human qualities of respect, valuing each other's individual inherent worth, and
Mhm.
being able to listen to one another without a desire to be seen to be the one who's the elevated above the other and the one who's the greatest. If you look at podcasting, Nemo's up there, we're here. But does that mean Nemo lords it? No. He's
Yes, he's
so
an
humble
arrogant,
and kind,
horrible.
and
He's a darling, and he's
he's an
very
absolute
commercial as
darling.
well.
He's supportive, he's helpful, he's everything that we would want a genuine brother of ours to be. Peter is.
Right? And
We've got such a fantastic group that are united, but we don't need comments from a prophet to unite us. We've become united because we have shared concern for one another, not because some prophet sits somewhere and says, oh, this is what you should be doing.
we have, and I want to make, this is more than just about we get to have really pleasant experiences, and that's quite nice for us, and feeling community is really good. This is what makes it, I think, when real unity and being in that space. For example, we now have Ruth with us as part of this gang, and Ruth is super busy with work and Sunstone planning and all of this, guys. We've given her a night off. She put in a holiday request, and we were like, oh, okay.
We authorised it. We authorised the night's annual leave.
So, but we think we're in all very different places. We have different wants, we have different goals. And this thing happens that all of these voices lift up into something bigger than you can do on your own. And I think that's kind of what, that this previous comment that we had on the screen, you wonderful human, just starting to feel brave enough to tell your siblings that you've left and no longer believe in this talk. Those people don't even get the chance that, if left to their own devices, that relationship could have become more strong, more united, because it's built on real communication and not, Sarah, the things we have to leave behind.
At the chapel
Right.
doors.
So talk
And
to me about
how
the
often,
chapel doors.
I think it's something that I've often thought about, is based on that old primary song that we all learned when we were little diddly kids, or we all taught when we were
So I
teachers.
missed it. So
What
you have to baby step me through this.
what do the chapel? Well, I can't remember the exact wording, but the words say the chapel doors seem to say to me, "Shh, be still. There are many things I can do, run and play and jump and hide, or something like that. But when I come to the chapel doors, it's shh, be still." And the thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is that phrase within that song, the chapel doors seem to say to me, what do our chapel doors say to us as we approach the chapel on a Sunday morning or any other time? As we approach one of our buildings, do those doors say, come inside and bring all of you, every little bit of you, come inside, because every bit of you is welcome? Or do their chapel's doors say, well, can you leave that bit of you outside and pick it up on the way out, please? Because we only want this nice little bit of you in here. And I think that's something really, really powerful about Do those chapel doors say, bring all of you forth into this place? Or do those chapel doors say, park that there, pick it up on the way out? And we can't talk about unity. We can't talk about belonging. And we definitely cannot talk about anything celestial if we have people coming into our chapels when half of them are left outside because it's not welcome. So which bits of us do we leave outside as we step in through those chapel doors?
And I think you're
I mean,
exactly
if you're gay, you leave that bit of you outside the chapel. You don't take that bit in with you because no one wants to hear it. No one wants to hear it. No one wants to know it. They might know it, but they'd rather pretend. So,
yeah. Well, you know, whenever you have enough social capital that you can kind of be the ward token queer person, or we've all been that person who does the speaking up and the, okay, I guess it's me again, I have to say the controversial thing. I would have absolutely pushed back against that at one point because I think because I've always had a big enough mouth to be able to say and be things that I've needed to say. But then you start to really live it and really experience it, and the toll of having to be that and work really hard for it, that maybe I hadn't noticed how much work I was having to put into it. Eventually the exhaustion becomes, I just can't keep fighting for this anymore. And you realize that you're exactly right. I would have utterly pushed back against that.
Right. But how easy is it to walk into that building dressed differently, believing differently, talking differently, or behaving differently? If you walked in through the chapel doors with your adult son that has significant disabilities and care needs, and you walked in through the chapel doors, actually, is all of that welcomed with all that might be required to accommodate those needs and all the changes in how things are done that is required to accommodate and give your son an equal welcome that anybody else would receive?
And but
how often
just bring that, just pull that apart a little bit, because I have only ever, and has Ronan only ever experienced, when we have turned up at church to those chapel doors or adjacent to them, welcome and love. Only, and there may have been occasional sort of, you know, issues, but nothing that's what I have been privileged to experience. But what belonging means and what welcome would really have to be is, okay, we're happy to see you, but you don't have a place here. We can't minister to your needs. We don't have a program that is we don't have enough people to adapt a program to you, and individuals are too busy. And this is not a criticism, because I don't know how to really put such a, you know, emphasis on this. We don't have the people. We really do. I mean, we are talking about handfuls of people turning up at church. So, you know, they are very, very limited in what they can offer. However, there is a legal opportunity, obligation to, you have to be able to cater to, you know, the Disability, right, you know, Discrimination Act. If you're going to offer something, you have to make reasonable adaptation. But if you wouldn't even make that in your heart to think about how that would look, so I can be happy to see you, but I don't want to fundamentally change something about myself to bring you in. And this is the thing, we have to be able to change and adapt to, you know, if it's going to be family members who are, everything changes. We have to change.
Right. And if we are not prepared to leave our comfort zone behind in order to extend that for other people, how are things going to change? We need to be drawing the circle wider and wider still, and even wider. But to do that, each and every one of us has to somewhere leave something in a comfort zone and say, do you know what? I'll step out of my comfort zone because this is what's needed. I'll step out of my comfort zone to welcome this person, to understand that person's needs, to try and learn a little bit about what this person is going through. I might not have experienced it, but I can try and learn and listen and love and understand.
And I get it because I hate change. I am rather
Yeah,
fearful of it.
yeah.
We have this okay here, but the Latter-day Saints signed up for a living church, and we have this ability to change things. We have this ability to respond dynamically and instantaneously. Now, that comes with a hell of a lot of faults.
We have
So
the
many. But you can do better, and you can. Those are things that can change right now, and that's what gets me. You have this opportunity to share this message to the entire world. The UK, when we can see a declining church and people are in so much pain. We know what Mormonism is like today. Your message is unity, but you don't give us the tools to be able to implement that. And everything has become so, the hatches are battened down. It feels very, very, inward centered, the church here at the moment. And I know people are trying, but then across the world, you have all of the things that are happening just now. And yeah, look inwards. Let's batten down the hatches, and let's focus on not hearing anything that's going to make us uneasy. There is no way we
right
have people
that
come
that
to and belong if you can't
right.
even, adapt and bring them in.
Okay, right, Jane, go back a little bit.
Like, go for it,
You
go.
can't even hear it. You can't even hear it. If you can't even hear it and you can't remember the importance of people, some time ago we did an episode, and Ruth is here in the chat with us tonight, our wonderful Ruth Heath, and she spoke about how quickly people become ghosts at church, how quickly people walk away, they're no longer attending, and they become ghosts in the minds of everyone else, and people almost forget they ever existed.
Yeah, they won't see them.
How often have we seen? I've seen this in my ward, and I guess every single person has, when a family that have been seen as the linchpin of the ward, strong, united, really committed to service, to the gospel, to everything the church wants and expects, they walk away as a family. The first week, everybody's in shock. What's happened? Where have they gone? By the second week, people are actually saying, well, you shouldn't really go around asking too many questions, should you? And it's much safer to stay in a little bubble, isn't it, than it is to risk listening to views that aren't helpful. Very, very quickly, we shift from thinking a family are wonderful and fantastic to kind of thinking, well, something wrong with them, really, isn't there? Because they've gone now. And then we forget all about them within a week or so. They're gone. Forget about them.
Yeah.
Move on. They're no longer in our corner. We don't need them. And that the church still tries to bring new people into the church. And we're thinking, can you just try to keep the people you've got? Make something that the people you've got is so good, people want it. And then people will see it for themselves and come to it.
Kirsty's has also shared, the fact that I think when people are neurodiverse or have any mental health need or physical need, whatever that can look like, those are fundamental adaptations that in this day and age we should be well used to being able to make, rather than make fear-based decisions that just means we're too lazy to do the work. I think people who have these types of barriers, before you can even get anywhere near a chapel door, you are putting the work in to be there. You are showing up and you are getting there. And then the next message that you get is, because the message that comes, from that we're supposed to, that we teach that Jesus is saying, is that you bring all of you, everything, all of these burdens. You can come here on a Sunday to the sacrament table. You can lay them all down. I take them all. That's my job. But before we can even get anywhere near Christ, this invitation to come unto Christ, more of these buzzwords that we love, you can't get anywhere near Christ because you are bumping up against members, because all of these, and you know what, that includes me. We are in the way of people getting to Christ. So if
Do you
you
know?
think you come to Christ, we've got this layer, you know, before you get to the chapel doors, it's the messaging that you're having to constantly push back. And this thing, the fact that Kirsty is even still there. Now, see if Kirsty decides that her family are right. You know what? This is not a healthy place to be in. Kirsty is smart enough to make those decisions for herself. Any suggestion, because Kirsty could be any one of these people that we are seeing posting on Facebook talking about how difficult this is, and we have seen it over and over again these past few days. Kirsty is our every person. Kirsty is smart enough to know the difference between someone who has a different opinion and someone who is undermining her choices and her belief system. She's a grown-up, she can handle it. And we have to empower people to be able to feel secure in that. The things that other people believe are not a threat to her. She's good. That being in these spaces means that she's actively trying to engage and work through the you know, the things that are going through all of our minds right now. What do we do with all of this information? How are we going to process it? Is this the thing that's too much? Do I need to let this go? Those are healthy things to be thinking. And we don't need to guarantee our way out of it that this is actually going to make you stronger and you'll stay in the church. And maybe you will, maybe you won't.
Maybe you won't.
Whatever will happen will be your journey and your choice. And that's what this church is supposed to empower you to do. But nobody, and this is I think the main thing that I want to get across, nobody gets to tell that woman how she gets to be a Mormon. If she is staying, she is staying, and I love this because you can hear in the comments, this woman knows herself, and if she chooses to stay, you will get her, and it is wonderful. And don't let anybody take your Mormonism away from you. It is yours to do with what you will. Peter was excommunicated. He doesn't recognize that, you know, he doesn't recognize the authority by which it happens. He is staying, and he's staying on his own terms. Sara.
Yeah, powerful thoughts, aren't they? Very, very powerful thoughts. And I'm just thinking at this moment in time about the barriers to creating that space where everybody can feel okay and safe. Because if we could have these discussions in Relief Society, in Sunday school, in Elders Quorum, if we could have these discussions there, we would actually get to a point where we would see where other people are coming from. We'd understand where their heart is at. We'd understand what their intentions were. And we'd be able to recognise the huge value of diversity. We get hung up on it, or the church gets so hung up on it, because I think people are so scared of being led astray, because they've been told over and over and over again that there's all these wolves in sheep's clothing, that there's all these people that are waiting to pull you away, there's people that are waiting to trip you up and put obstacles in your way of getting to live with God forever. And we see and hear so much of this for all the years that we're growing up in a Mormonism, that it actually becomes completely alien to then sit down and listen to somebody with a completely different perspective of tithing, or a different perspective of how they view marriage, or a different perspective of how they view sexuality, or how they view Jesus, how they view prayer. People have a completely different view. And because all our life we've been conditioned that there is only one right way of doing and accepting these things, that becomes so threatening and so alienating to us that we don't know what to do with it. And the other thing, when you were talking, that really hit me powerfully was conversations you and I have had, and we've had these conversations with Ruth and the rest of the gang a few times about the chapel doors and what they say. How many times have we said that a couple of our family members are so vulnerable, we would not be willing to take them to church with us if they asked and wanted to come? You know, a couple of our family members, children, grandchildren, we've said, there is no way. I don't want to take you to church, and this is why I don't want to take you to that space. Because we know that some of the messages that they would hear, not necessarily the people. Not the people would probably be lovely and kind and friendly and welcoming and lovely, but the messages they would hear would be really destructive messages. Right, I'm just going to say I've lost volume at the moment and can't hear you, Jane. So carry on talking while I try and fix my volume, okay? Listen to that. Jane, you're muted. You're still muted. Okay, I think Jane is muted, everyone. Okay, Jane has now disappeared. I'm hoping she'll be back in a
Sorry about these
problem.
technical issues, folk. Is my audio back? I am so sorry.
You know what? There's a lesson in that. There is a lesson in what just happened there. Because all of a sudden I'm listening and I suddenly went silent. I couldn't hear a thing you were saying. And my immediate response was, my audio's failed. I can't hear.
Yes.
I'm pressing buttons. I'm unplugging headphones. I'm pressing buttons. I'm looking. I'm thinking, what do I do? My audio's gone. Because the first immediate response was, what have I done wrong? I've done something and lost your audio.
Right.
Then you find out it's you that was muted.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a lesson. There's a lesson there about church, isn't there, really? How often do we think it's us? We think it's us, and actually find out it's not really you at all. It's not you at all, folks. It's not you at all. But we think it is.
Thank you so much for being patient by that. So basically what I'd wanted to say was that over the weekend in the post-conference analysis that Nemo had been doing over in his channel, there were many wonderful moments. These online communities that we have, this, our chat family that, we have across the entirety of the blog vernacular podcasting spectrum, have done miraculous work, have saved lives. And I know that word miraculous can be problematic. Do whatever you like with it. Over the weekend, what I got to see was Nemo would allude to a message that was shared that could be applied perhaps to the LGBTQ community. And in the chat, immediately, when Nemo had said something in acknowledgement, that tiny little moment would lead to all of these conversations and people sharing their pronouns and all of this wonderful, wonderful conversation that was affirming. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm watching this unfold and I'm looking at, in my mind, the graphs where you see the statistics of conference weekend and what happens in those graphs to LGBTQ teens and the suicide rate just right up, because we trust in the church, that counsel that you promised would be good, that we could rely on. Don't listen to anyone else. Just look here. Our kids, we are looking at it, we are listening to it, and we are putting all of our hope, every ounce of it, onto that. And what we get is rejection.
We get made very clear the celestial kingdom is not for you.
Yes. And I'm not even actually going to just, detangle how physically dangerous some of those messages are. But, look after your LGBTQ family and friends, over these next few days. Just check in to make sure that they're okay. In the chat, affirmation was happening because we got a breadcrumb. When we ask for bread and we get the conference version of a stone, we get the conference version of poison, it is horrific to see and know what the inevitable impact will be. And the chat came together to almost in a way mitigate for some individuals who were there the impact of those harmful messages. That happens because of you people who are listening, because you created a community. Nobody gets to tell you how you live and act and who you support in this space. You love, you continue to do the work that you do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like a big deal, and it gets considered, less moral than if you spent your time reading a book. You were in the chat doing your work, being you. I loved it. It inspired me. So, unity, belonging, I think are much more important messages for this weekend. And the incredible thing is, I got to find it in this space rather than
Yeah,
because of conference.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sara, do you want to
And
share
I think that,
any thoughts?
do I want to share final thoughts, did you say?
Yeah.
Do you know, I think the final thoughts I've got to share are we can be united, we can be kind, we can look after one another. We don't have to agree with what people think, we don't have to agree with what people feel, but we can just be kind and we can accept people as they are. And that doesn't matter what they're like, just accept people as they are. We've nothing to fear. We have absolutely nothing to fear by difference. We've got a lot to fear by control and manipulation and sameness, because that doesn't allow for growth, it doesn't allow for spiritual development, it doesn't allow for the divine part of us and the human part of us to both grow and shape and move forward. It doesn't. Control, fear don't allow for that. But just being kind and respectful and allowing, enabling, encouraging difference brings huge
Encouraging it.
strength.
Yes,
Brings strength. There is strength in difference.
there is. Turning the church itself and leadership, even members within it, into its own little mini version of an idol is not what any of us signed up for. And I am so glad to have this space. I love you guys. I really, really do. I am really excited to tell you guys that on Sunday we have something very special coming up for you before Nemo's show. We have, in honour of the fact it's getting dark these days a little bit earlier, we have an After Dark episode. We're going to be talking with some of the ladies from burlesque, and we're going to be talking about shame, modesty, body shaming, modesty culture, all of those types of things, sexuality, and movement. So we've got some incredible ladies in an episode this Sunday night at 7:00 entitled Good Girls. Watch out for that coming soon. Don't forget, Sunstone, please register.
Yeah.
Get your merch in advance. If you want to find it at our online store, you can get that on our website. You can also go to Nemo the Mormon's YouTube channel. So between us, we have all the Brit Avengers merch. You will love it. Get a mug, get a tote, get a t-shirt, and the gang, because they're there, will have Sharpies and can sign it for you. And I will pay money to see someone get photographs of Nemo signing an autograph. People have tried before and he's managed to wiggle out of it. Not this Sunstone. So yeah, get your merch in while you can. It's we've got some really good items there. Anything else we need to tell the world about, Sara? Are we good?
Just a shout out for Sunstone. It is going to be phenomenal. We did a shout out at the beginning of the program. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. We need to see you all there. We need to see as many of you there as possible.
Absolutely. And as a final little save the date, and we'll tell you more about this in 2 weeks, if you have any travel plans and fancy coming to Scotland this April, save the date for the weekend of the 13th of April. We've got something big planned. So if you want to get your pens, your calendars handy and check your schedule, have a look at flights, make sure your passports are in order. We want to see you. Keep an eye out and we'll tell you more soon. So have a good night, everyone. We love you all and we bless your journeys.